Great. Well, welcome everybody to this session on making sustainability mainstream. And I'm just going to share my screen and get my slide deck up, and we will get cracking. So, just a quick agenda before we get going. We're going to have a few minutes just of introductions, and I would encourage all of you to pop a little introduction in the chat about yourselves, what it is that you do, why you're interested in this session, help us all get to know each other a little bit. Then we'll have 15 minutes talking about, Gauthier and I will talk about the problem that we're facing and why we've created this session. And then I'll introduce some questions, and then we'll move into breakout rooms, where we'll have about 20 minutes in breakout rooms to discuss the topic of making sustainability mainstream, and then we'll come back, share a summary of what we discussed in our breakout rooms, and next steps on how we can take this forward to actually make sustainability mainstream in the industry. So, quick introductions. Introduction from myself. So I'm Tom Greenwood. I run a digital agency in the UK called Whole Grain Digital, which is a design and development agency that focuses on WordPress and has a kind of a strong ethos in terms of sustainability, both in terms of our business operations, but also in terms of promoting greening of the digital sector. And we've been involved in a number of projects. We created a website, Carbon Calculator, a website, carbon.com. We were involved in writing the Sustainable Web Manifesto. We recently worked with another agency called Mighty Bytes to create the new version of sustainablewebdesign.org, which is a resource for sustainability sort of actions that you can take in web projects. And most recently, I wrote a book for a book apart called Sustainable Web Design. And Gauthier, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. So I'm Gauthier. I'm from France. I've been working on the field of digital sustainability for 2 to 3 years with two different perspectives. The first one is that I'm a digital designer. So I've been working in design for a while now, and I was starting to do research through a PhD on how the environmental crisis is modifying the way we are designing digital systems. So it includes infrastructures and services. And right now, I'm working a lot in France around digital sustainability, which is a big topic now in France. And I'm coaching digital teams to include sustainability in the project, and how do we actually, through a project, especially a statewide project, we can implement digital sustainability. So I'm doing that for national services, especially for the National Agency for Ecological Transition in France, and also for other public institutions so far.
Great, thank you, Gauthier. So what are we here to discuss? Sustainability is a topic that has obviously been an important topic for society for many, many decades, and it's increasingly been gaining, some real attention in terms of the need to move towards solutions to the climate crisis and the ecological crisis in all sorts of industries. But the digital sector has been rather quiet on sustainability and its impact in general, primarily talking about its positive impact, but very rarely talking about what its actual kind of potential negative impacts on the environment are. And so we want to make it more of a mainstream part of the conversation in the digital sector. So today we were hoping that as a group, we'll have a variety of different perspectives from different backgrounds, different places in the world, where we can actually share ideas of what has worked to actually make sustainability more of a mainstream topic in different areas within our industry that we can learn from each other, and also perhaps things that have worked to get other topics like accessibility and privacy, for example, make them more mainstream. And could we take some of those approaches and those ideas and apply them to the topic of sustainability to help make it part of the mainstream conversation within our industry? So that's the main topic for today. The problem, many of you may be familiar with this if you're in this session, but you may not be, so I will give a quick introduction. So if we just look at carbon emissions, the internet, although it appears to be clean, we don't see exhaust emissions coming out of our computers or our phones. The internet, if you take it as a global machine, actually has very large emissions, similar in volume to Germany, which is the 7th largest polluter in the world, and now actually overtaking aviation as a global industry. And we obviously, most of us would think of aviation as quite a polluting industry, but actually, just in terms of carbon emissions, the digital sector has probably already overtaken it. So this is a really serious thing, and we need to take it seriously as an industry and not kind of brush it under the carpet, saying that, well, digital is like fundamentally good and doesn't have any side effects. We need to actually make sure that we embrace the good, but actually also try to address the potential downsides of digital on the environment. So the carbon emissions are coming from two places. Not from two places, from the manufacturing and the operations of the whole system. And that's data centers, it's also transmission networks, and it's also end user devices and everything that goes in between. But it's manufacturing and operations energy of all of those things. And it adds up to a lot. But one of the reasons that Gauthier and I got talking about this is that sort of where I am in the UK, we seem to focus almost primarily on carbon emissions as like the environmental impact of digital. And actually, there's more to it than just in carbon emissions. So Gauthier, do you want to just sort of introduce some of the broader impacts?
Yeah, so in France, we can have a different strategy to approach sustainability in the digital sector. We tend not to look only at energy and then the resulting greenhouse gas emissions. We also try to look at the depletion of resources, like mineral resources, and also the consumption of water. So what is the water footprint of digital sector, which is quite important for us because you can have a lot of pollution transfer or impact transfer from energy to water, for example. Then you can use less energy, for example, for cooling down data centers, because you will not use AC anymore, but then you start using water to cool it down. So there are shifts that you need to observe, and at the same time, more efficient equipment during the use phase can be much more impactful in manufacturing to get this efficiency. So in France, we tend to use what we call a life cycle assessment perspective. So in the digital sector, it means that we are looking, like Tom was saying, at manufacturing and user operations on the three parts of the digital sector. So end user equipment or end user devices, networks, and data center. And then we look at 4 different criteria. So energy, GHG, resources, water. And as you can see, from kind of the point of view that we have in France, we are focusing mainly on end user devices, not because they are more impactful just per unit, but just because there is a lot of them. So we estimate that the number that we normally use in France is to say that right now there is 34 billion digital equipment in the world, and most of them are end user devices, and this includes IoT. So it's because there is so much equipment that most of the footprints is located in end user devices. And then we also have to be very careful that the manufacturing phase is really impactful, especially on user devices. So you cannot really see it, but like for a smartphone, 80 to 90% of the energy will be used for manufacturing. So 10% left will just be operation, like using electricity to recharge your phone. But yet, if you look at networks and data centers, the use phase will be much more energy intensive. So it's very important, from the French perspective, to have a more global view of all the different impacts. But it's also deeply linked to the French landscape. So we tend to have an energy that is less carbonated because of nuclear power, that we want it or not. So we cannot only focus on GHG emission. That's why we're including all of that, and also to be more careful to the fact that resources are being depleted, and most of the times they are being depleted in countries that are very far away from where the end user devices are being used. And also it's more global perspective of what is the digital sector and its impact worldwide outside of what we can see.
Great. Shall I go to the next slide?
Yeah. And I wanted also to emphasize that when we think of digital sector, it's just one sector between many others, but all of them need to transform themselves. If we are looking at the Paris Agreement, we need to change every sector. And the digital sector might be around 3 to 4% of global emissions. It's not a lot. It's definitely not a lot if you compare to agriculture, transport, industry, or energy transformation. Yet, we have to divide its footprint by 4 if we want to stabilize at the end of the century at +2 degrees. And there is some intermediary targets. And one of them, the one I'm kind of focusing on my work right now, is to try to understand what does the digital sector look like when we only have 1.7 tons equivalent CO2 per year per person, which is what we should aim for according to the Paris Agreement. And at the moment, the digital sector does not fit in this target, like all the other sectors. So we need to understand what will it look like if we try to enter that by 2050. And that's not a relative value; it's an absolute value, so we cannot retreat on it. So that's something. It's really important to keep in mind that we have these targets, and we need to do our best to reach it, not just to postpone it or to say it will get better by itself.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's really important just to sort of on that emphasize the fact that digital is one of the fastest growing sources of energy consumption and emissions and resource consumption. So although there are efficiency gains happening all the time in terms of the efficiency, like the operational efficiency of networks and of computing power, the actual energy and emissions of the industry as a whole are accelerating fast. And so that means that in the context of us needing to radically reduce the emissions per person globally of everything that we do, we can't let digital be the thing that kind of gets in the way of that by constantly increasing over the next couple of decades.
And the fact is that in all estimates that are being provided today by the research community, all of them are estimating that the energy consumption of the digital sector will rise anyway. So right now, the digital sector is set on a path of increasing energy consumption when we should actually radically decrease it, because just using more renewables will not do it. We also need to reduce energy consumption, and that's not the path that the digital sector is following right now.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we're here to discuss as a group. We've got some questions that we've laid out, and we've got a Miro board. So sorry about all the text on this slide, but it'll be much simpler in the Miro board. But just to quickly run you through, these are the questions that we thought would be interesting to discuss in our breakout rooms. So number one, were you taught about digital environmental impact in education? And do you think that making the environmental conversation of digital part of the education system could be beneficial to solving this sustainability problem? Question number two, is digital sustainability part of the conversation in the place where you work? And if so, what actions do you think helped make that part of the conversation that others might be able to take to their workplaces? Question number three is, what do you expect from the public and private sectors on this issue? And which do you think is a better stepping stone? So do you think that this is a thing that the public sector should be leading on in terms of like government action? Or do you think that this is something that should be led by the private sector, or perhaps both? That's a really interesting discussion point. Question number four, how to have issues like privacy and accessibility become more mainstream in the digital sector? Some key ethical issues that perhaps originally were kind of on the fringe and very much considered, secondary to commercial concerns, and gradually have become more and more part of the conversation? How have they achieved that, and could we learn from them? Question number 5, which actors do you think would be the best entry point to promote digital sustainability? So which types of people within the industry do you think are best positioned to actually promote this message? And perhaps you have personal experiences of that. And then question number 6, do you have new ideas? Maybe it's not just things that you've seen and have been tried before, but maybe you've got new ideas on how we could take action as a community or as individuals to make sustainability more of a priority within the digital sector. So with that in mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit my slide deck, and we will share a link to a Miro board in the chat. And Miro board, if you haven't used it before, Miro is like an online whiteboarding software. So you'll be able to click the link in the chat and go through to that, and there'll be 2 groups. And what I'll do is I'll create 2 breakout groups, and there's on the Miro board, there's group 1 and group 2, the same questions. And Gauthier and I will each facilitate a group, and we'll have a discussion together. And there's sticky notes at the top of those boards where you can grab a sticky note. You don't have to ask anyone's permission. You can just grab a sticky note and write your ideas and put them in the relevant place, but also contribute to the verbal conversation. So hopefully that will become clear once we're in the Miro board, but Gauthier and I will be there in the breakout rooms to explain how it will work. So Gauthier, are you able to share the Miro link?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think I can. Just
there we go. All right. Hopefully you should all have that. And what we'll do is I will generate the breakout rooms now, and we will see you in there.
Okay, so I'm going room 2. Okay, I think we're good. Can you hear me? Is this right? Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, so we are taking the group 2 part of the board, and I think we can open mics if we want, and so we can also chat. And at the same time, we can discuss about each part of each section. So on the first question, it would be also interesting to just to say from what kind of education background you come from. If you're from a designer, developer, engineer, political sciences, I don't know. Just to know from where you are speaking of regarding the education question.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. Definitely didn't learn about environmental impacts on for digital industry or even business economics. So I studied business economics and engineering, mechanical engineering. And none of this was a part of the curriculum. This was also, just for context, 2005, 2000.
Okay. Yeah, sustainability wasn't mainstream, not even in all the other sectors.
It was, well, sustainability was cradle to cradle was the book, right? But like that's specifically talking about physical products as opposed to anything related to physical products, like the commercialization of physical products, the organizations that launch it. Now the websites that sell it, that wasn't even part of the conversation.
Okay, and now you are working in the digital sector, right?
Correct.
Okay, and so, but we'll talk about it in the other questions. But feel free to use the sticky notes to enter your your answer. Is there someone else would like to chat?
Sure.
Yeah.
I can.
Oh, sorry, Nishal, you go first.
Are you sure? Okay. So Nishal here. I work in a city local government in California. I am a data analytics manager here. A couple of super high level thoughts. I think while it is important that the impact of each industry and each sector assessed and evaluated and constantly monitored, I do think that there is a need to ensure that we don't fall into the trap of accountability that is typically passed down from the industry onto the end consumers. And especially in terms of the sector. So going back to the original, the slides where we were talking about the impact of the digital sector being equivalent to that of aviation industry, it is also important to realize that I think the best estimates are that about 5% of the world population has ever flown in an airplane. And the internet is touched upon by at least 60 to 70% of the world's population. So there is an absolute, impact in terms of emission, but it's also like what gains are made in per unit, per capita, or per unit interaction or transaction. How much is the impact? So I think we have to be thoughtful about how much we beat upon ourselves for being in a digital ecosystem and kind of considering us equivalent of other industry when if you look at the benefits of the services and per unit interaction sort of cost, we might be operating in a very, very different level plane. So just wanted to highlight that particular point.
Okay, thank you. So maybe you can get, I mean, we touch on this question a bit later. So maybe it will be also interesting to go just to finish with the education part. So just feel free to grab sticky notes on the Miro board and just to write your perspective on that. And but I will get back later on this point. So I think my group is not. We are not really. I don't know if I'm just really bad at managing a room or a workshop room, but it feels like nobody is using sticky notes in my group, so I feel like a bit ashamed compared to the other group. So just feel free to interact with the Miro board.
I also feel like, no offense to the faces that I can see, we all went to school a while ago. So maybe we can move on to a question about sustainability at work.
Okay, wait. I'm just trying to see all your faces actually because I cannot see everybody. Wait. Okay.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah, that's better. Okay. So
I did go back to university just a few years ago.
Okay, show off.
And it was. I'm not sure if that's showing off really. No, but also that. So in the second master's, I studied behavioral sciences, and not heard anything about sustainability of anything we did there. It's just not a topic. But yes, also in the previous my previous studies before that, biomedical engineering, that's just not addressed. No. And I think it would be really good.
Okay.
Just a quick note on the education bit. I think this education conversation is an important one because the conversation of sustainability so far has been siloed into either like an operations facilities role in organizations. More recently, it's been taken under the umbrella of finance and accounting because you can accommodate for the investments into your ESG program. And, it's good CSR, corporate social responsibility. And so, yeah, it stems back to like what we think our sphere of influence is in our company around sustainability. Like who ultimately at work, it's how will you be evaluated on your performance? How does this contribute to the role that you have? If you're doing any additional work outside of that, it's really difficult to either push forward an agenda or be recognized for the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
Which then drives people back into their like specific role.
Yeah. For example, if I take it from a more designer point of view, I went back to studies also a few years ago, and for designers, for example, especially digital designers, there is no link between the digital service that you are designing and the material constraints that you are allocating to your project. You don't know how energy, carbon emission, water resources you will actually need for your project to be built, and you don't know its impact. It's never been part of the design education of the digital design education, for example. And so even in books or like mainstream methodologies, you think nothing in UX, UI, or stuff like that. That's quite interesting. There is big knowledge gaps just for this digital design, at least.
I'm curious to hear, in speaking about like design constraints, I'm curious to hear what incentive models are in each of the places that we work, and what incentives support or hinder a sustainability conversation. For me, this is like where most of the challenge comes in executing a sustainable idea.
Yeah.
Is when there's tension with the incentive models. So
yeah,
I'm not.
So maybe we can jump on the second question, and hopefully some people already did that. So just to see if you can say that if digital sustainability have already been part of where you are working, and so far it's been a little bit and now and no.
Can I talk?
Yeah.
Hi all. I'm Nicola. I'm a web developer from Italy. I founded in 2015 a web agency here in Italy, and we learned about the environmental impact of our digital world about in 2018. Briefly, we learned about this kind of problem by reading some news on our business, but this is not a real problem in Italy. There is no knowledge about this kind of problem here, and so we try to get into this kind of problem and try to talk about our customers and also with our partners in the cyber farms, and try to better understand how to improve our business in order to less carbon emissions and a better world. So regarding the question, is digital sustainability part of the conversation work? Briefly, yes, because we are trying to make this information wide as possible. Briefly, our customers are not aware about this kind of problem. They are interested into improve their digital sustainability, but by now they are mainly focused into the standard priorities, like we're a web agency, so the standards could be the fast website, show high resolution images to high resolution videos, and get inbound, sell products, and so the sustainable task goes on the bottom of the list, most of all. But if we try to explain the problem to our customers, I can see that they are sensible to this kind of problem. And we try to insist about this. We see that there's an answer from them. So it's kind of a good idea to go forward.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would like to interact more, but I don't know if we need to jump on the question. But just a quick perspective from my experience in France. I've been working with mostly public actors for the French state mostly, and for national agencies, in which I'm asked to coach to do the coaching of digital teams for that, and knowing that like the energy, GHG, water resources, distribution of impacts. For me, the starting point of digital sustainability will be that we need to reduce the environmental footprint of the service, whether it's digital or not.
Yeah.
Because we need to reach the targets. That is quite hard. The second one is we need to answer effectively to needs expressed by users. So that's the starting point. That's easy. Everybody's doing that now. I mean, we don't need digital sustainability to do that anyway. And then when I put it into actions, into a methodology, the first thing is the service should not decrease the lifespan of end user devices. That's the first thing for us, because we know that most of the impact is on manufacturing and end user devices. So if my service can add 6 months more to the lifespan of the smartphone or the laptop being used by a citizen, it's great. It's fantastic. We are actually influencing on where the impacts are. The second thing is we're also looking for maintainability. So my KPI for that is we are looking for 10 years plus service lifespan digital services in terms of technical maintainability, and also use pertinence. Like we need 10 years later, we still need to answer. I don't know how to say that in English. With well, yeah, we has to be useful basically 10 years later. The third thing is that we need to reduce the overall consumption of resources anyway. The fourth thing is that sustainability is just another entry point to get accessibility, to get privacy, to get open data. It all goes together. There is no mean to change it, to just make it as a other stack that you are piling up on already very complex project, and especially for performance. I mean, my KPI are quite rough, especially for public services. On average, a page for me need to wait between like 150 kilobytes to 200 kilobytes. So because it has to be loaded in less than 3 seconds on 3G, on bad 3G. So it's also a question of technical accessibility. Especially if I'm working on a public service for a job seeker, you don't need like a $1,000 smartphone to access a service to actually look for a job.
Yeah,
he has to work on a very bad with a smartphone and laptop with very little memory and little calculation power. And then, so there's lots of principles that I'm advocating in the public services, but based on the impacts that we have right now. And so normally when I do websites, they are quite performant because it's really easy to be performant when your website, the average page weight is 200 kilobytes. So that's how I approach it in France, at least.
I have a question for, I mean, I guess for everyone, but also you know, like with the increase of like digital services, especially, you know, a year into COVID, I can only imagine that a mixed physical and digital service offering will continue over the next couple of years. How do you explore, examine, make a decision on the trade-offs between like a higher data footprint for an organization, service, product, and the carbon footprint that's attached to that? Is there any, you know, how have you navigated that conversation with clients, for instance? Have you?
Okay, so for me, I have an agnostic position on digitalization, which is, I don't know if it would be, it's not always really well understood or well received, but which is to say, digitalizing something is not always better. And we need to assess if we are digitizing or not, and to assess if the digitalization makes sense regarding sustainability issues. I have a methodology to assess that, but I'm blocking on something is that I need to have an in-total assessment of the service I would like to digitalize. And in 99.99% of all cases, you never have an in-total assessment of your service, and which is quite a block point, like a pain point for now. At the same time, I also want my clients to understand what they will not be able to digitalize, even while they are digitalizing something. For example, when we are taking out a post office in a village, in a rural place in France, you are not. The post office is not only a place where you are sending and receiving letters or parcels. It's also a place of socialization, of people meeting, part of the local life. And we just need to be aware that when we are digitizing that, and that this place disappears in the village, there is things that we are losing. And we just need to be aware of what we cannot do with digital technologies and what we can do. But there is always trade-offs. And the fact is, I feel like most of the time, we are not really well trained to express the trade-off that comes with digitalization. And especially, but I take it from the perspective where I've been working more with rural areas at the moment. So I see a really different perspective. So I also have like a very territory-based at the moment perspective at the moment. But I can be heard at the state level, but it's like that.
I'd love to add something to it. Hey everybody, Gauthier. Because I think this is a really important point as this the digitalization and understanding the impact as it relates to carbon evolves in our education. The replacement, I think, is a critical question because it's the classic question of natural gas. It's a partial replacement, but really understanding the benefits that digitization is doing to replace maybe alternative ways that are producing carbon emissions, but it's a much more effective way. Even if it has its own issues, it may be reducing, if it's an option that replaces, and we've clearly seen that in the pandemic, the upside of the pandemic. Clearly, we've all seen the pictures of Italy and all the rest where emissions have dropped dramatically with indirectly digitization, right, and the use of remote. So it would be great to get understand the impact of the replacement, the trade-off, as was said, of what digitization is doing. I mean, I think every organization and ourselves, we're doing an evaluation, a self-analysis on what do we produce and how can we do it better. That's just a basic exercise that I think all organizations should be thoughtful in going through. And then what can you do to improve your own carbon footprint? But the separate note on digitization, I think it's really important to try to get a hold of the data. And I don't know where, I haven't seen that data as to what's the benefits that digitization is doing, notwithstanding the issues that have been raised, which is fair. But it's really important to understand what are the benefits, because the trade-off, you want to be able to focus on the areas that really matter, in addition to just doing what we can to do it better, because you don't want to spend all this money and investment on an area if the trade-off is pretty positive. So anyway.
Yeah. If you want, I can add something on that, because I just read a report assessing, I mean, it's an analysis of how we assess positive impact of digital sector on climate. But it's a take on two claims that have been around for a while, which is one from GSMA, so the Global System Communication Association, saying that 1 gram of CO2 emitted in the digital sector allow us to avoid 10 grams emitted in other sectors. So there is a trade-off of 1 gram for 10 avoided. And there is another claim from GSI, so Global E-Sustainability Initiative, saying that the digital sector can help us reduce GHG emission worldwide by 20%. So basically, I've looked at all the data, all the hypotheses that being behind that, and I've looked at data, world data on GHG emission, on where they're claiming avoidance, on European data, national data, sectoral data. And so far, I haven't seen any of the claims they've been saying around for a while. So so far my position on that is we don't really know how to assess positive impact of digital industry. And I think we cannot also just base our opinion on what the industry is producing as data, because the methodologies that they're using are quite flawed, to be fair. But nobody's really looking at it so far, because we like to think that it will be obviously positive, but yet we don't know how. And so I have a mixed opinion about that, but I think we are still lacking a lot of methodology to actually effectively assess positive impact. And the fact is, not in most cases, it doesn't replace something, it's just piling up. Or if it's replacing something, it's adding something else elsewhere. For example, I was visiting, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much, I should not do that. We are doing a workshop and well, we are very bad students, sorry. But for example, I was visiting a recycling facility center, waste recycling center. And obviously, like the waste stream coming from papers, journal, printed media have decreased a lot. But at the same time, all the decrease on this stream have been overly compensated by the stream of waste coming from online shopping, the boxes from online shopping. So it's why, I mean, for now, I don't have that much perspective on global issues. I can only do on the field and do my research as a PhD for my PhD. But we need to, I think, to have a very field-based view on that.
Just one other quick thought. I mean, Gauthier, I completely understand what you're saying. I mean, I think, but it's really important for this particular sector to frame the argument, right? We got to be able to frame. You need to get data, right, to support some of the positions, because in order to ultimately convince the private sector, even with the public sector initiatives, we need data, the data to be able to frame the argument so that it can resonate with both leadership in the private sector as well as the public sector, for that matter. So it's great that we're talking about it, but I think getting a hold of the data to support it, to your points, is really, really important, because I think that's the only way you ultimately start convincing people.
The data is in French so far. I need to translate, but the report have been put online today. So, and there is a summary in English, but that's the best I can do for now before translation. And all the data is there, and all sectors and countries are being analyzed in this report. So it's a good point to start at least. So sorry, we need to focus. I'm too chatty. I'm really bad at doing workshops. I know. So maybe if we can think of, like for example, with Tom we spoke about the private and public sectors, like which one is the best stepping stone, because for example in France, the state regulation is really helping us go forward in this issue. The digital sustainability is a big topic right now, for MPs and the French Senate, and there is a bill being passed that will be passed soon, and we are working with MPs in France to make it better. But yet it's very a Frenchy approach to go through the state regulation, and I know it's not working like that in all countries. So I was also curious to see from your own perspective in your own country, how do you approach it? And you can use sticky notes.
Interested to hear the American EU divide on this. Is there one?
But you can use sticky notes. You can if you want to stop me babbling and chatting all the time.
Well, I was going to mention a couple of. One is a launched private company called Provenance. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's based in London, but they do like supply chain verification for consumer brands. So for instance, Cult Beauty here in the UK, prides itself on its clean beauty products. And so what Providence does, using blockchain, which is energy inefficient, creates this this immutable log of the supply chain claims of different brands, and then creates a CMS so that those stories of sustainability can be surfaced onto product pages on Cult Beauty. So if a customer is on a product site, you can see that, like, okay, this fair trade claim, this product has a fair trade claim, and this is how we evaluated this. And so it closes the loop for brands to do that accountability measure of doing their supply chain analysis and sharing results, but then linking it to the consumer conversation too, which I think is a really hard part of the puzzle. Is taking what you've done internally at the organization to figure out what your emissions are, and then link it into what the consumer knows in the messaging. And then another company that's Stealth, a successfully exited startup founder, has started a new company focusing on how businesses, who to your point are the biggest emitters of carbon, can begin to take responsibility and accountability for their carbon emissions. So it's sort of like Providence, which has a consumer-facing narrative and moves it into a B2B space. So holding, for instance, a L'Oreal accountable. And what would that look like within industry?
Okay, could you add it to the sticky notes?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. But there is one point that is really critical when you are looking at digital sustainability. It's at every point of your analysis, you are struggling to get data. It's actually quite ironic that in a sector that is producing that much data, it's really hard to get data about material impact, energy intensity, and so on. And that's been one of the big issues that we have so far, especially when we are doing life cycle assessments. It's really a fight to get data. And it's one of the major issues that we have right now.
Well, if data is such a problem, then we might have to address the one thing that's not so sensitive to data, and that is emotion. And then you might have to play it through public opinion.
Yeah, but for when you are at the state or public policy level, there are really evidence-based data, and if you don't produce that, it's really hard to convince barely everybody. But then at the with private clients or people that are going to use your service, you can have a much more interesting approach regarding that.
So, Gauthier, question: what is the key problem you're trying to address for which you are looking for data?
I'm looking basically for the four impacts that you saw earlier. So, which is the resources depletion. Basically all the resources used in a product, all the water consumption regarding this product, energy and GHG, and so far it's really hard to get because most of the life cycle assessments are private or under NDAs. So there is no public database for that. So that's actually in France. Right now we are trying to advocate for open database regarding that we can actually help us have a way better assessment of the impact of digital industry, but specifically in France, because the issue is to have a national wide database. On a global database, you got too much. It's too broad. You really right now my focus is to work on national database to make it better, because it's easier to get good data on that level. And then when we got that, it means that we can standardize the way we are doing lifecycle assessments for digital products, and then we have a much better handle on assessing further digital development. And at the moment, we passed a bill recently, so it became a law that so on every client's invoice for data plan, you will have the amount of traffic of that data, monthly data used, and CO2 equivalent regarding the data that have been used. And it took us 1.5 years to get to the number to translate that data traffic to carbonic equivalency. So yeah, it takes a long time.
Yeah. So I was wondering, in the absence of that sort of industry-specific granular data, maybe there is merit in looking at macro inputs, like basic things like, hey, have we seen a change in the fuel emission or fuel consumption across the planet or across the nation, or what's the deforestation looking like, and trying to correlate sort of like the internet traffic or digital traffic data with that macro. I can totally also imagine it being just a noise in that entire set of spectrum. But I wonder if somebody has approached this not from a very industry-specific, transaction-oriented life cycle emission versus finding sort of a signal in macro trends.
Yeah.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Okay. So just to answer to before we were cut off. So yes, there is macro studies, and if you want, I can send you most of the scientific literature on global estimates.
Okay.
I can stop. We've been a very bad group in my workshop. We not really use Post-it notes. I think I'm really bad at making workshops.
Post-it notes are not the be all and end all.
I take full responsibility.
Okay, you did good. I think we had a pretty robust conversation and got some really good comments in. And at the end of the day, it's the communication that matters, not necessarily how we do it. So you did
exactly.
Good.
Yeah. Gauthier, do you want to briefly sum up some of the ideas that were shared in your group?
Well, okay, let me back on the many Post-it notes that we got there. So I think we have like a broad consensus that not that much people were thought about sustainability, where does it come from? And also, apparently in my group, we are a bit older.
Well, specifically digital sustainability, not, yeah. I think there was a lot of consensus around sustainability.
Yeah, digital sustainability, sorry. So far, not that we might claim that there might be knowledge gaps. So I've been babbling a lot, and I've been talking a lot in my group. So I was talking basically that in France we tend to have more of a state-based approach, trying to fight for regulation that will influence the markets and industries, rather than going through in companies that change the regulation. We talk about supply chains and how can we ensure that we got the data about the impact of products that we are using, and then how to manage to get the data about the supply chain. And then we talked about that, the fact that getting data about the digital sector, about the environmental impact of the digital sector is really, really, really hard, as we both know.
And yeah, we discussed that as well.
Yeah, you're always fighting to get data, to get about energy consumption, material use, water consumption. It's really, really hard to get. So we were talking about what are the global estimates. So there's scientific papers I can give on that, and also I can give you the limits on that. And then I've also, sorry, I've been talking a lot, but there is a lot. We had, I think, a pleasant conversation. That, from my perspective, and I'm working with digital teams, there is one point that is critical, is that to say that we need to digitalize, and if we digitalize, will it be more impactful sustainability-wise than just keeping the service as it is? And how do we assess that? And if someone in my group would like to add something, feel free.
Great.
This is
Thanks,
Nishal again. I think Ethan had a good point around when we look at the impact of digitization, we shouldn't just look at it from the just the outcomes from a digitization perspective, but rather also what it replaced, and sort of find that closed loop delta between what transformed versus what new emerged. I hope, Ethan, I captured your essence reasonably over there.
Yes.
So really looking at the full picture.
Yes, you did.
Great. Thank you. Shall I just sum up? We've got just a few minutes left before this session closes. Shall I just sum up a few of the additional things that our group touched on? So, I mean, there was a sort of resounding no in terms of, has anybody ever learned about digital sustainability in the education system? So I think there's definitely a hole to be filled there. In terms of like companies actually talking about it, somebody said that just like people who are passionate giving talks, like company stand-ups and so on, is a good way of getting it out there. Also, like design and development teams really like interesting challenges. So, and a lot of their work can actually be fairly routine. So giving them sustainability as something for them to get their teeth stuck into, and as an excuse to try new things, can be quite powerful in getting their buy-in. And somebody also mentioned that it could potentially help with things like grant applications if for nonprofits, where you're showing that you're really kind of going to the next level in terms of looking at your environmental footprint. We talked about open source projects and how they could really play a role, particularly kind of large open source projects, if they can get some sort of backing, whether it's grant funding or whether it's commercial backing, to actually embed sustainability into their projects, like has happened in some open source projects with like accessibility teams. They could have sustainability teams as well. That could be really powerful. Legislation such as carbon reporting or carbon taxes, and forcing open data energy consumption from data centers particularly was something that was talked about. GDPR was brought up as an example, and so was the European Alley Act as kind of legislation that helped get more people looking seriously at accessibility and privacy. And so, there's potential down the line for some sort of government legislation could get people talking, but that was also suggested that having an organization like W3 kind of leading the charge on that behind the scenes in terms of actually setting some guidelines of like what are best practices might actually provide a foundation that then can be used by governments to design some sort of legislation, and also kind of probably push further than the legislation itself will be able to do so. And then other general ideas were that Google could make it a factor in search rankings. That would probably have a massive impact in terms of getting people motivated. Netflix could make a documentary on it if they could be honest about it. And we also heard from Eric about kind of just the general issue of like, as more and more people get access to the internet, so that's going to have a big impact on the environmental impact of the internet. But actually, in those places where digital adoption is sort of still happening, where you've got, and what we don't want is like repeating the same mistakes. So more kind of cross-pollination between countries, where countries with low digital adoption can go to countries that have got high digital adoption, say, okay, what worked, what didn't work in terms of reducing the impact? Are there ways that we can like help our country adopt it in a more efficient, more eco-friendly way? Would be really, really valuable. I think that's all we've got time for. I'm gonna see if there's a way, hopefully the Mozilla team will help me share some information afterwards, probably next week, with some notes. Gauthier and I, somehow between us, will work out about writing like an article summary that we'll put online and share with you guys. And we'll also, you've got the link to the Miro board, which you can refer back to. I think that will stay online, so I think it's public, so you should be able to kind of look at that and refer to it. And And then we'll also share the slide deck, which has some additional resources at the end, which we didn't talk through, but you'll be able to look at those in case they're useful. And yes, following up, if anybody wants to get in contact, please do contact myself or Gauthier. We'd love to talk about this more. You can find me just by going to the Whole Grain Digital website and use the contact form, or tweet at Eat Whole Grain, or go to find me on LinkedIn. I'm Tom Greenwood. And Gauthier, what's the best way to contact you?
I forgot. Just one heads up. So if you are looking for specific scientific publication, scientific papers about one specific topic about digital sustainability, you can reach to me. I have a pretty thorough vision of what's being published on the topic so far, so I can be helpful on that. And also, in the good news regarding digital sustainability, in France, we recently introduced the Repairability Score. So every electronic products, most electronic products, but including smartphones, will now have a repairability score based on the ease to be open, to be repaired, to have open documentation, standard tools, standard screws. And it's been a big victory for us, and especially it will go further in Europe with the right to repair movement.
That's fantastic. That's exciting news, and definitely something that I hope other countries will follow on.
Can you both drop your emails in the chat, please?
Sure. I will pop it in there. So what I think we'll do is we'll officially close now, but I will leave it running for a little bit longer so that you can copy and paste anything from the chat that you want. But from Andy, from your point of view of recording, we can officially close.